Hey guys, Mr. Fransky here again. I'm going to continue our little calculator series here, talking about some of the tricks that you can use when you're in the calculator window. You should already have watched the video about how to set up your calculus document, and we're going to use that right now. So I'm going to go to my calculator. Oh, that's not my calculator. There it is. And I'm going to go to My Documents. So when I turn it on, you see this screen, I'm going to hit number 2, or just click on it, or use the arrows to get there. So I'm going to use number 2 to go to My Documents. And mine automatically goes to the bottom. If you're at the top, you're going to scroll all the way down. You should have that calculus document that you made, Calc BC or Calc AB or whatever you called it. I'm going to hit Enter on that guy. And that's going to open up my calculus window. So right now it looks like I have a calculator window open. You might not have had anything, or you might have a bunch of tabs up there already. But you want to be in a calculator window right now. So if you're in a graph or something, you can either tab over to a calculator window, or you can hit on and you can add a new calculator window. Now I'm just going to go to current because I already have one open. So I'm in my calculus document, and I have this this window open with a calculator. That's what where I want to be right now. We're going to talk about a few different tricks that you can use here. We're going to start out by defining a function. So defining a function is very useful, especially if you're dealing with a lot of negative signs. And we're going to see what's going on with some of these down here. So in your experience, if you're given a function like this, f of x equals x squared minus 7, you've learned about functions since Algebra 1. Basically, whatever you put in for this x right here, you have to also put in for the x over here. So like for f of 3, obviously we know how to do that, right? 3 squared is 9 minus 7 is 2. Not a problem. But the calculator actually has an easy way to do this. Like notice I want like 3 values of g here, and the g function is a little bit more complicated. So I want something that will make this happen faster. So what I'm going to do is in my calculator, let's define both of these. So I'm going to type f, and I'm going to use the actual letter keys here. I can type it on my keyboard, but I'll just do it here. So f parentheses x, right there. And now this is the important button to remember. It's colon equals. The colon equals is right above this funny value button right here. So over to the right of the 9, just above it right here is this colon equals. So you're going to hit Control and then hit that button. It's going to give you that colon equal sign. And now I'm going to type my function. So I'm going to type x squared minus 7. So I'm going to do x, I got a square right there, minus 7. There we go. Then you're going to hit Enter, and it's going to say done. So done means, okay, I'm going to remember this. I'm going to remember that f of x means x squared minus 7. Now the cool thing is you can just type f parentheses 3, close the parentheses, hit Enter, and it's going to give you the answer. So obviously this is a really simple one, right? But let's define g of x as well. So why don't you try defining g of x? You can pause the video if you want to, and then we'll do it together. All right, let's define g of x. So I'm going to do g parentheses x. There we go. The parentheses over on the left of the 0. That colon equals. So I'm going to do Control and that little weird button. And I'm going to type in x cubed. So I'm going to do it all with the buttons here. X cubed. Use the right arrow to get out of that exponent. So x cubed minus 2x squared. So I'm going to do 2x squared. And then plus 9x. So plus 9x. Is it minus 5? Minus 5, yep. Okay. So hit Enter, it's going to tell me done. So now I'm going to get all these values real quick. So I'm going to do g of 4. I'm just going to type it on my keyboard. I'm going to cheat a little bit. G of 4, 63. Wonderful. G of negative 7. G of negative 7 is negative 509. G of negative 2. That's negative 39. And let's see, f of negative 8. F of negative 8 is 57. And some of these, the reason I like this is because the calculator will do order of operations for you, right? I think sometimes, and I know you guys are all really good at order of operations, right? But we're plugging in negative 7, let's say, in here. Negative 7 cubed. Well, when we cube a negative number, it's going to stay negative, right? But then we have minus 2x squared. I think some people look at this and they say, well, negative 7 squared. Okay, do I do the negative 7 and then multiply it by itself, or do I do 7 squared and make it negative? And oh, what about this negative out here? Negative signs are there to distract you and to make you mess up. And if you're 100% confident in them, it's not that bad. But if you're not, then the calculator will do all the work for you. So when it's doing this, it is automatically knowing, okay, negative 7 squared is positive 49, times 2 is 98, and we are subtracting that from negative 7 cubed. So it's doing all this work for you. You don't have to do anything, which is really nice. Okay, where do we leave off? Oh, here we are. F of g of 3. F of g of 3. Boom, 954. Okay, so it's doing all this work for us, which is really nice. Now, this is really where in calculus it comes into play. We do a lot of subtracting of functions. Now, when you subtract two functions, this negative gets distributed to all of these. Parentheses are really, really important. So for this, you're actually doing x squared minus 7, and you'd be subtracting this entire function. So all of these signs are going to change. You'd be subtracting x cubed, then you'd actually be adding 2x squared minus 9x plus 5. I don't have my stylus with me today, so I can't write on the screen. I'm sorry. But basically, when you subtract a function, you have to use parentheses around the whole thing. And then you have to subtract each term one at a time. Sometimes people forget to use those parentheses. We learned that a lot with derivatives when we were doing them this year, that you have to subtract that entire function, and that's hard. Here it's not so bad, because I can just plug in the 3, get the value, and subtract it. But really what you're doing there is you're doing all the subtraction in advance, and then you're subtracting the resulting value, which is really changing all those signs anyway. So on the calculator, though, I can just do f of 3 minus g of 3. I don't have to worry about any of that sign change stuff. It's negative 29. Not too bad. And the last one, f of negative 2 minus g of negative 2. Minus g of negative 2. Boom. 36. Not too bad. Now the last thing they're asking us to do is graph f and g of x. Now this is another great place that I think that the document really trumps the scratch pad. So because I'm in a document, when I define these in this window, even if I open a new tab, it's going to keep these definitions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit my on to go home, and then I'm going to add a graph right here. And when I add that graph, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to type, so it says f1 of x. This is different than the f of x I defined. So I'm going to do f parentheses x. And notice that it's bold, because if I do that, it's just going to give me f of x. Pretty cool. Now I want to graph g of x as well. Remember that trick to graph a second function? I think I just hit the tab key right over here, right? So I'm going to hit tab, and I'm going to do g of x. Enter. All right, well, I can't really see g of x right now. And in the graphing tutorial, we're actually going to learn about how to change the window and see different parts of that graph. But right now we have f and g graphed without having to type it in again. So because we defined those functions over here, we defined f of x and g of x, it remembered them in this graph window. Remember, if you don't want to scroll up and change these, you can use Control left and Control right to be able to go between tabs. Okay, so that's defining a function. Definitely something we're going to use a lot in calculus when we start taking derivatives and integrals. So defining a function, good thing to know. All right, next up, so storing a variable. Storing a variable is something that's useful if you're going to use the same variable over and over again. So if you know the value of something and you want to use it lots of times. So we have f of x and g of x, which are the same functions we had before. Hey, they're already defined. That's awesome. So we have them defined already. And they're giving us a value of k. All right, so k is 17 root 5 minus 22 pi over 6 plus 2. That is a mess. First thing they want us to do is find k cubed. So I could type the whole thing in and just cube it. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to type this in. So I'm going to do 17 square root is right here, Control x squared. So 17 square root of 5 minus 22 pi. 22, remember pi is next to the h. And I'm going to put that in parentheses because I need to divide that whole thing by 6. There's one thing that's nice about the Inspire is when I hit enter, it's going to make it, it uses what's called pretty print, and I want it to look just like the problem. So I'm going to do plus 2. I'm going to enter and I'm going to see if it looks like what I want. 17 root 5 minus 22 pi over 6 plus 2. Now what they did here is they just separated it. So they did 22, 6, they reduced to 11 over 3, and then they have the plus 2 at the end. So what I'm going to do is I actually want to see what that is as a decimal. So I'm going to do Control enter. It gives me the squiggly equal sign. It gives me a decimal. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to store this value, and I'm going to store it for k. So notice right above VAR, right here above the 9, there's a little STO in blue. So I'm going to do Control, hit that button, getting me STO, and I'm going to store it as k. Why not? Because that's what they have. So you always do the number store as the variable. This is something we do in computer science a lot. You take the number and you're assigning it to the variable. Hit enter, and it's going to say, all right, here's your number. We have stored it for k. Now whenever you hit k, it's going to be that number. So now if I want to do k cubed, k to the third. Enter. There you go. K to the third is negative 32.268. All right. So this is nice, especially like in chemistry. In chemistry, I know there's a constant R that you use all the time, 0.08206, I think is what it is. You could store that in your calculator, and you'll have it forever. Right? And they always give that on the formula sheet anyway, so it's not like you're cheating. It's just nice to have it there all the time. Planck's constant, H, could do that, right, in physics. And there's a whole number of variables that never change, or they're really constants, right? They're not variables, they're constants that never change. So it's nice to have them. So now let's see if we can find f of k and g of k. Well, our functions are already defined, right? So I can do f parentheses k, hit enter, 3.135. I believe them. All right, g of k. Now, one thing that is worth mentioning, though, is you need to make sure your values are right, right? Like, if you defined one of these functions incorrectly, and then we're using them over and over and over again, that would be bad news. So make sure that you're defining your functions correctly when you do this. Okay? Let's see, they want f of k quantity squared. So to do that I could do the parentheses just like they did them. So I could do, bracket. So bracket is control left. So it's going to be a bracket. So I'm going to do f parentheses k, close parentheses. And on the outside of the bracket, I'm going to do a square. Okay. Oh, that's not what I want. I guess the brackets don't work there. Okay, that's fine. So instead, then I'm just going to do f of k, and then on the outside, I'm going to put a square. So that's taking f of k, which is this value right up here, and then squaring it. That should be different than f of k squared. So if I do f of k squared on the inside, I think that's going to give me a different value, because the difference here, 95.7, huge. So the difference here is that here we're taking the function value and then taking the result and squaring it. Here we're squaring k first, and then plugging it into the function. So just some functionality. This is, like I said, a kind of level 1 of storing a variable. This isn't really useful. Because really you can just use this value, and you can do grabbing, which we're actually going to learn later, and just keep putting it back in. Okay. I want to see if I want to talk about grabbing right now. I think that's the end. Yep, we'll wait on that. Oh, I don't know if I have grabbing. Let's talk about it now. So another thing you can do, instead of storing the variable, and I think you guys have practiced with this before, but you can actually just hit your up arrow. So when you're down here, I think you can also probably scroll up and click with the trackpad, but I prefer to use the arrow. So when you're down here, let's say I wanted to do f of k, and I forgot to store it. Well, I wrote k up here somewhere, and if I keep hitting up, I see, okay, there it is. So what I can do is just do f parentheses, and then hit my up arrow a bunch of times. And there is k. I'm going to hit enter. It's going to enter it right there, and close the parentheses and hit enter. This is also great because maybe I did k wrong. Maybe k was actually supposed to be -2, and I didn't type it in correct. If I hit up, and I go back to where I defined it, right here, I'm going to hit enter. It's going to pull that expression down. Now I can hit the left arrow once, just delete that plus and make it a minus, and now it's going to have the value for me. And if I do control enter, that's going to give me the value, right? I'm going to change it back to a plus, though, because that's what it was supposed to be. And it's already stored as k, so we're good there. So that's kind of storing values level 1. Let's take a look at how we can be a little bit more complex about this. So they have f of x equals x squared minus 7, and g of x is x cubed minus 2x squared plus 9x minus 5. F of k equals 0. Find all possible values of g of k. So there's 2 layers to this. First thing I have to do is I have to find out what the heck k is. So I have to find out what k is, and I'm going to plug it into the g function. So to find that f of k, or that k value, I have a couple options. My favorite is to graph. So I'm going to graph this function, and I'm going to find out what value I can plug in that'll give it 0. So I'm going to go and I'm going to add a graph. So add a graph, and I'm going to graph f of x. I think we have it graphed in a different window, but let's just do this. I'm going to graph f of x. Looks like we have 2 0 values. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to menu. I'm going to analyze graph and find the 0. Remember, I can use my arrows at this point. Ask for a lower bound, so I have to go to the left of one of the zeros. Lower means less than. And then ask for the upper bound, so I'll go to the right, scroll through it. Looks like we got a 0 right there. Lots of decimal places, which I want because I changed that to float in my document. And now I'm going to basically scroll down. I'm going to use the trackpad. This is one spot that you have to use the trackpad. So I'm going to scroll down until my little hand is right over the number, and I'm going to click. And notice what happened. The number kind of turned gray. It's a little bit lighter than it was before. If you click too many times, it'll actually highlight it. You don't want that. So you want to just click so that it turns gray like that. So it kind of gives you that different color. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our buddy store. So I'm going to go Control, Store. And notice it gives us that $= sign again. Okay, just like when we defined our function. And the VAR is highlighted. That's because it's waiting to know what variable it wants. When you click your variable, I'm going to use x. It's going to cover that up. And you'll have x : and then that number. So it's going to save that. I'm going to hit enter. And now it turned bold. Bold kind of means that it signifies something. Okay? So that is my x value right now. And as long as I'm here, The problem asked for all possible values of g of k. So we need all the k's that make this 0. So I need the one over here as well. So I'm going to go to Menu, Analyze Graph. I'm going to do 0. And we're going to click on the left side of that and the right side of that. And we get another 0. And it's actually symmetric. It's just the positive value of this. So now I'm going to practice again. I'm going to scroll. I'm going to highlight it. I'm going to click on it. Not highlighted. I just want it to be gray. There we go. Okay. And I'm going to do Menu, and I'm going to Store, and this time I'll make it Y. Okay, so X is over here, and Y is over here, and we want to know G of those values. So I'm going to get back to my calculator window. I'll just use Control Left to get back to that tab, and now I'm going to do F of X. And notice X is bold because it knows that that X value is the one that's plugged in, and that gives us 0, which is what we wanted. We wanted F of K to be 0. And so now I'm going to do G of X, because they asked for G of X, and they asked for G of Y, and that gives me those two values they asked for. So this is a little bit more advanced. Basically, you're finding the 0 of a function, and then you're taking it back and you're plugging it in. Kind of cool. All right. So next up, e to the x. E to the x is not too bad. It's just basically the thing you have to remember. Everyone always does this. So if you want e cubed, everyone says, okay, well, e, let's see, that's right here. There's e, and then they do caret, and they do 3, and they hit enter, and you get e cubed. And if you do Control Enter, it still just gives you e cubed. And the reason for this is because this e right here, it actually is thinking about that like the x that we just stored a variable for. So it's thinking, all right, well, what's e? Because we haven't stored e as anything. Like, we don't have a number assigned to that e. Because this e is not like the 2.7182, like the big e number that we have. If you want that e, you gotta go right here. Notice that e is bold because that e represents something. If you do e cubed there and do Control Enter, it's going to give me a value because that is actually like 2.7 cubed. All right. So up here, this e that I use down here, not what I want. All right. So now to get these values, it's pretty easy, right? Negative e squared. I'm just going to type negative, this negative, and then going to go e squared. Gives me negative e squared, which Control Enter, negative 7.3. Now, there's an important thing here. A lot of people look at this and say, wait, Mr. Fransky, don't squares always make numbers positive? Well, yes, but remember order of operations here. We're doing the exponent first, and then this negative is really a negative 1 multiplied by e squared. So you do the e squared first, then the negative is applied. So let's do this. 2 plus 7 e to the pi. So do 2 plus 7. My e is right here. And to get the pi, remember that's next to the h. So 2 plus 7 e to the pi, hit enter, and it keeps giving me exact answers because that's how I have it set. Control Enter gives me 163.9848. Okay. Let's see here, negative e quantity squared. So this should be different than negative e squared because this time they're saying, well, we're going to do the multiplication first because it's inside the parentheses. Then we're going to take the result and square it. So negative e times negative e, the negatives will cancel, and then we'll have a positive number. So let's try that. Let's do in parentheses, negative e squared, negative e, close parentheses, and square it. You might have noticed there, sorry, I should do that a little bit slower. Gosh, it tells me it's positive e squared, right? But if you just want e, so if you don't want it to be squared or anything, you have to get rid of that little box. So what you can do is just go to the right, use your right arrow, and then hit delete, and hit delete again, and it'll just give you e. Control Enter should give me that 2.718 number. All right, let's do the last one. E to the sine of 3 pi over 4. So that should be e to the root 2 over 2. So e to the sine, I can either type sine, S-I-N, using the keyboard down here, or I'm going to go to trig, do sine. I'm going to do 3 pi over 4, Control Enter. Gives me 2.028. I believe that. Sure. Root 2 over 2 is less than 1, so this should be a reduction of e. So that's all there really is to e to the x. If you want to make a graph of it, let's show that real quick. So graph, and we want to graph e to the x. So e to the x, Control Enter. Oop. Just enter. Let's get caught up with that enter. All right, and there we go. Okay, e to the x, not too bad. Just make sure you're using the little guy over here. You're not typing e or using this e down here. All right, one more thing we're going to do on this video, and that's absolute value. So absolute value is just something that you don't use every day, and that's why I wanted to put it in one of these videos. So if you want to deal with absolute value, there's a spot to get it. It's right over here, next to the 9. So if I go back to my calculator window, so right next to the 9 over here, if you hit this button, And there's all kinds of fun goodies in here. And what you want to use is this guy right here that has the absolute value bars. And notice it's automatically highlighted when I click that button. Most of your calculators are probably set to that because absolute value is probably what you use the most often in here. So if you just hit that button and it's already highlighted, you can just hit enter. Or you can use your arrows to select whatever one you want. But what it does is it gives you absolute value, and then you can plug in on the inside whatever you want. So let's see what they're asking us to do here. So f of x, x cubed minus 4x plus 1, k is negative 3. So let's use what we've learned. Let's define that function. So f of x is already defined as something else. Let's define it as our new function. So I'm going to do f of x control colon equals. And I'm going to type in x cubed. Let me use some shortcuts here. X cubed minus 4x plus 1. Hit enter. It'll tell me done. Excellent. And so they want f of absolute value of k. So I might as well store k as negative 3. Even though it would be pretty easy just to type it in, I'm going to type, negative 3. And I'm going to store it. Control store. Oh, boo. Negative 3. There we go. Control store for k. Okay, so now it's negative 3. It was something else before, but now it's negative 3. Now I can just type in f parentheses, going to get that absolute value next to the 9. K, right? We could just type in 3 and hit enter. And let's see, it should give me what? 27 minus 12, which is 15 plus 1, 16. Yep, sounds good to me. Now we're going to do absolute value of f of k. So this time I'm going to do absolute value first. I don't want that 9, don't know why that's there. And I'm going to type in f parentheses k. This should give me something different. It gives me 14. The reason for that is because the first one says, let's take positive 3 and put it in. This one says, let's put in negative 3, which would be negative 27, plus 12, which is negative 15, plus 1 is negative 14, and then they take the absolute value of that result. So there's a difference between those two things. That's an important distinction that we'll talk about a lot in calculus when we talk about distance traveled of a particle. So last thing is to graph f of absolute x and absolute f of x. So let's add a graph. And I'm just going to graph f of x to start. Okay, so we have this nice cubic function. Now let's think. If we graph absolute value of f of x, it's going to take everything that's negative. We talked about this a little bit in pre-calc. But everything that's negative, it's going to flip it to the top. So let's do that. So let's actually, I'm going to hit tab. I'm going to hit up arrow, and I'm going to turn off that function. And underneath it, I'm going to do the absolute value next to the 9 of f of x. And notice what happens. Like, normally this part was down at the bottom to start with. Now it flipped to the top. This part was also down at the bottom, flipped to the top. So everything is now positive. There's a great benefit in calculus when you're talking about particle motion to be able to graph a function like this. And doing it on your calculator, really, really easy. Now, if I turn this function off, this time I'm going to do f of absolute value of x. Let's see what the difference is. To be honest, I haven't graphed this, so I don't know what it's going to look like. Interesting. So basically what happened now is they're saying, well, if x is negative, it's going to behave as if it were positive. So we have this even function now where it's the same on the left side and the right side. Kind of cool. So that's it for this one. I hope that you learned a little bit something about how to use your calculator, some of those tricks. I especially like the grabbing. Being able to use your arrows and just go up and grab previous expressions you've written saves you a lot of time. And also that defining functions can really save you a lot of time if you're doing the same function over and over again. So, I hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you for the last piece of this little calculus prep soon. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.